Welcome to the world of scale modeling with Mike Ashe, where techniques, tips, and creativity come alive with dozens of tutorials, projects, tape-up reviews, and picture references to help you build better scale models and enjoy our wonderful hobby. Welcome to Part 9 of our 10-part series on building and detailing the Revell Monogram 148 scale C-47. In Part 9, we'll do all of the masking, we'll airbrush the finished colors, we'll do some detail airbrushing, and we'll prepare the surface for decals by applying a beautiful gloss coat. So, let's get started.
I've got the engine nacelles glued into place, and how I did it was I put a little bit of tester's glue on the inside so that when you push it into place, the glue will get pushed onto the inside, none of it'll squeeze out. So that worked really well. The other thing is you have to kind of eye the placement of these because there's no locating pins. So I used on the port wing, I used these engraved lines and matched them up with these petite raised lines here. But on this wing, you kind of have to shift it just a little bit this way. They're offset a little bit towards the fuselage. But looks pretty good. The air intake for the instruments, I re-glued that in place with a tiny drop of tester's glue because I had broken that off earlier. And it took a little bit of work to get the canopy in place. I did paint around the rim of the canopy, and it looks a little sloppy, but once I get it taped up and airbrushed, it'll look a lot better. And I had to put white glue. There was a gap here, around here, and there's a gap around here, around this side, that I had to fill with white glue here and here. So I used tiny drops of white glue and contoured it with a damp Q-tip. So it's coming along pretty good. And what I need to do now is I'm going to go ahead and mix my primer, and I'll airbrush these areas and fill these gaps with some Elmer's glue, and then I'll be able to put these on like this, tape them on. I gotta tape the inside areas here, mask it, and then I can glue these on to kind of prepare it for airbrushing. But before I do that, I'll go ahead and mask the glass windows. The other thing I'm going to do, because the light gray color does come up and touch the lower parts of the doors, I'll go ahead and I'll fill this area with a lot of tissue and then put some double-faced masking tape on it, and that will hold these parts in place and allow me to go ahead and airbrush where I need to airbrush, so the gray will come up to about here. So both those will be taped on, and then stuff some tissue here and do my tissue and masking tape on the landing gear. And I think what I'll do is I'll just keep the gray color on the underside of the fuselage. But what I will do is there's a little bit of a gap here, and I'll go ahead and fill that with some white glue so that it'll look better. But it's come along pretty good. The other thing I'll do, I was looking at pictures of the DC-3s that I'm going to post for you. These plates right here are for the landing lights, and the landing lights sit, or the navigation lights sit right there. So what I have to do is flatten that out a little bit so that my landing lights or the navigation lights that I'm going to install will sit correctly on here. And I have to do it on both sides. So we are getting there, and this is a fairly big model, and Monogram did a pretty good job considering the age of it. Of course, the new trumpeter kit has got a lot more interior detail, which you're not going to see. And on the exterior, everything is engraved panel lines with indented rivets. If they had just done raised rivets like the real aircraft, it would have been very accurate. But the fit is a lot better than this kit. But I am working my way through all the old Monogram large-scale 148 scale kits. So we are in good shape. Oh, one more thing. I did get some white glue in here to fill that seam right there, that opening. And once that's primed, it'll look pretty good. So we are almost there, and we are ready to start masking the windows. And then we'll get everything set up to prime it, and I'll show you how the windows are masked first before I do the rest of these attachments, these pieces and these pieces. And then we'll be ready to go. I started airbrushing the primer and underside coat and realized that I forgot to shoot a video on how I did the masking. So we're going to backtrack just a little bit. I used small strips of masking tape for these areas here, and then I stuffed tissue paper down into these openings and then covered it with masking tape. On the cowlings, what I did was I masked the inside area and then attached them to the engine nacelles with some masking tape, so that when I mask the lower area for the olive drab color on the upper surface, the gray on the sides of the cowlings will match. So that's how I did the underside. This area here, what I did was I just kind of ran tape around the edge and put tape on the inside as much as I could, stuffed it with tissue paper again, and covered it with masking tape. The windows were easy because they were square, and that's how they look. And the navigation dome, I just stuffed some tissue paper in here, and that worked real well. Took a little bit of work to get the canopy glass masked, but that came out pretty good too. So the only thing I'm worried about is where I had to flatten the front a little bit because it was sticking out too far. So hopefully that'll work out and it'll look okay. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you is on the underside, because of the bad fit of the wing assembly to the fuselage, we've got some bumps here. And if you smooth these out, you're going to lose even more detail. So I'm not going to mess with this. What I'm going to do is hide it with some weathering. And the same thing up here. It's not so bad up here. But once I run my dark pastels across the bottom to replicate dirt, grease, and grime, most of this will be hidden. The eye won't pick it up so readily. So my first coat of the gray came out pretty good. And I am ready to, I got to put a little bit more right there, and I'll go ahead and coat this a little bit more. It's already got 2 light coats on it, but some of the red marker is showing through on here, so I got to give that a little bit of more paint, and then I can turn it over, and I'll go ahead and clean the upper side with some Windex on tissue paper, and to help keep the dust bunnies at a minimum. Just before I spray, what I'll do is I'll use the airbrush with high pressure air to get all the dust off of here, and then immediately give it a coat, and that should help a lot. So it's a big model, and it's going to look pretty good when it's done. So we are ready to continue painting. Now this is just one final note. This is just Tester's 1/4 ounce bottle flat gray, and I added a little bit of white to it to lighten it up a little bit. So not only is this acting as a primer for me, of course it's not really a primer, but the primer coat for checking for flaws, and so far so good, that I also going to use this as the undercoat color because I lightened it up a little bit. So yeah, it's looking pretty good so far. I've got 2 coats of primer, that light gray, and came out pretty good. So I did the first coat, and I had a little bit of an opening here, and then the openings down here, and the openings along the outside edge of the reinforcing rib here, and they were all filled with white glue and new coats of primer put on them, and they look pretty good, especially back here. So yeah, they look pretty good, and up here too. So let me flip it over and show you the front and the top. All looks good. So what I'm going to do next is I'll go ahead and mask the underside areas here and on this side and on the back in preparation for the lighter shade for the fabric. I'm just going to use a few drops more to just differentiate the color just a little bit here. And then before I do that, I'll show you the masking and then we'll move on. So yeah, it's looking pretty good so far. Big model. Big model. But I really like the way it's looking so far. And let's see here, the canopy glass looks pretty good so far. So I'm really pleased with the way it's coming out. I've got the bottom mast for the slightly lighter color for the fabric surfaces, and this is how I did it. I use really low pressure air, about 15 psi, and I'll shoot this way and shoot this way and then shoot out this way. So we should be pretty good. And we'll take a look at it when we're done. I'm gonna just put a few drops of flat white in this color, and that should lighten it up just enough. It'll kind of blend in once I do the pastel mild weathering on the bottom, but for now I think we're looking pretty good. So go ahead and airbrush it and show you what it looks like when a little bit of dust there when we're done. I've got two coats of the lighter color of the light gray, and you can really see the difference. I tried to make it subtle because you don't get a lot of light from the sun bleaching on the underside like you do on the other side, on the upper side with the olive drab, although you are going to get some fading because it's fabric colored, and there is a variance and difference in color between steel that's painted and the fabric that's painted. So it came out pretty good. All the lines are nice and clean, and we've got nice demarcation lines between the metal and the fabric and the hinges. And on the back end of the airplane, same thing. So what I'm going to do here is I'll tape around this and shoot this with this color, and that'll take care of that slight hinge there. So and once I dirty it up under here a little bit, you'll see the difference. But it came out so far so good, and I didn't have any paint peeling. So and I had cleaned the surface really well with alcohol, Windex, and then alcohol again, and it made a big difference. So what I'm going to do now is I got to trace some patterns on for the fuselage here, and then for the engine nacelles, and then go ahead and run tape all the way around so that we can protect the underside, and then I'll be able to shoot 2 coats of olive drab, and then do the same thing on the top here, which is to give the fabric a lighter coat. And there'll be more of a variance in color between the olive drab on the metal and olive drab on the fabric, because you get a lot more bleaching from the direct rays of the sun. But so far so good. I really like the way it looks so far. So the next thing is to go ahead and mask it all up, and I'll show you what that looks like, and then we can do the airbrushing. I've got all the masking done for the olive drab color, and I just wanted to show you real quick how I did this. Yeah, it's a lot of masking tape. As usual, I use a lot of masking tape, but better than that than having to do a whole bunch of touch-up work. So it's looking pretty good. Now, and the whole underside is masked, so I don't have to worry about having to do any touch-up work under here. So now I'll use low pressure air and olive drab, and the top will get 2 coats. And then when I'm done, then I've got to do the black boot stripes. There's really no outlines for the black boot stripes on the wings or the horizontal stabilizer or the tail, so I'm just going to have to figure out how to do it. And then once that's done, then I'll mask these off and put the interior color here for the landing lights. And then gloss coat, decals, dull coat, and mild weathering. So let's get to it. I've got 2 coats of olive drab on the top, and all the tape's been pulled off, and it came out pretty good. So the engine cowlings look really good. Yeah, I'm trying to be careful here because they're not, there's a little bit right there. I got to fix that. But yeah, so I have them marked starboard and port, so I won't mix them up. So the paint went on really, really nice. And nice sharp demarcation lines. It's off a little bit here, so what I'll do is I'll sponge a little bit of silver paint here to replicate some worn paint. And I got the same thing on the other side, right there and there and there. I'll fix those. Those are kind of sharp edges, but no paint bleeding. And the front came out good too. Now, once this gets dirtied up a little bit, it'll look really, really good. So next step, I gotta put some masking tape on the upper parts of the control surfaces and the tail, and we will then give them a lighter coat. So this right here is a little bit of white glue. I shouldn't have done that, but when you go ahead and put this on, it closes up that area right like that. So yeah, pretty good. So here we go. So I'll show you the masking on the upper surfaces, and then we'll proceed on. So it came out really, really good. I've got the upper surfaces, the outlines masked, and came out pretty good. So what I need to do now is put larger 3-inch tape all around here to prevent it from overspraying, and when I shoot the airbrush, it'll go that way. And here's the tail. So far, so good. The other thing I did, and it's still drying, you can just barely see it in this void here and the void here. I put white glue in here, and then when it all dries, I'll go ahead and run a tiny, using a detail brush, I'll put some paint in there and close up that gap. It won't look 100%, but it'll look a lot better than a hole there. Although you're not going to see it. You will see this a little bit, which is why I wanted to take care of this, but I went ahead and did this too at the same time. So, yeah, looking good. And then I've got these pieces on the underside to elevate it a little bit so I can put some tape around the perimeter here to prevent overspray from going underneath it. So with that short explanation, I'm going to go ahead and finish taping up, and then go ahead and airbrush a lighter coat of the olive drab color, and then we'll take a look at it. The control surfaces have been airbrushed with a lighter shade of the olive drab. So we'll go ahead and pull the tape off and see how it looks. I think it's going to look pretty good. So I did had a little bit of spitting on with the airbrush, and if that happens, and if you immediately just overcoat it, it'll help flatten out the spitting, and that worked here. So again, the other thing is having these pieces under here to elevate it so it doesn't rub off any of the paint on the underside is a good idea. So let's go ahead and slowly pull the tape off. Hopefully I won't have any areas where the tape is pulling up the paint, and we'll be ready for the next step. With all the tape removed, came out pretty good. I'm just trying to be careful how I pick this up. Nice sharp demarcation lines. There's the tail. And the underside, just to show you, there's, because of the way I taped it, no bleeding. So we are now ready to go ahead and mask for the black boot stripes along here and here in the tail and on the rudder, and small pieces right in here. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what that looks like before I go ahead and spray. I've got the de-icer boots on the main wing, airbrushed flat black, and came out pretty good. Had to use a lot of tape because, as you can see, you got to shoot it this way, and so you got to make sure that all this dust doesn't get past this masking tape. So that's why I used liberal amounts of masking tape. So now I can go ahead and well, you can see where the outlines are. So I'll go ahead and pull all the tape off except for the area where the outlines are, because I just did this about an hour ago, and I like to let my paint dry for about 24 hours. So when we get all the tape pulled off on the outlines, we'll take a look at it. I think it's going to look pretty good. I masked off the areas for the landing lights, and it came out pretty good. Again, you need to put enough tape on here to prevent any airbrush dust from getting past it. But and as soon as I take this off, I'll show you the de-icing boots. I got a fairly good demarcation line, although I had a little bit of paint bleeding on the underside, and I think it's because I didn't burnish the tape down enough, but I was able to use a detail brush to fix most of it. So we'll go ahead and take the tape off and see how it looks. Okay, so all the tape's been removed and got a tiny bit of bleeding on the edges here. Not everywhere, but enough. I'm going to have to fix that, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a sec. You can also see the demarcation lines on the de-icer boots are pretty good. Oh, here's the other one. Got the same thing, just a tiny bit. But I'm going to go ahead and let that dry some more, and what I'm going to do is I will use this very tiny IMAX detail brush to do that touch-up. And I have a small bottle of Testor's Flat Black, and this one has a little bit of thinner added to it so that it'll flow a little bit better, but not enough so that it just flows everywhere, because this paint's pretty thick, so a few drops of thinner helps it flow. So I'll do that, and then we'll take a look at it, and then all I have to do is I'll go ahead and put a little masking tape on the inside of the first two windows, stuff it with some tissue, and we are ready to give it a gloss coat, add the decals, then give it a Testor's dull coat, and do a little bit of weathering. So we are moving along, and it's looking pretty good. I've got the touch-up work done around the rim of the landing lights, and came out pretty good. So I got rid of that minor paint bleeding. So once I put the glass on, it'll look really good, and I've got the lenses done. And so now I need to go ahead and get it prepped for glossing, and I'll use Minwax polyurethane clear gloss, and it gives a really nice finish. I usually put 2 coats on it, and I'll let each coat sit for 24 hours, and then we'll go ahead and cut out the decals using my technique of getting rid of all of the clear film on the sides of the decals so that these decals look like they're painted on. And yeah, not bad for a kit that came out in 1978, and with just some basic scale modeling skills, you can really make this model pop. So it's on to the next step. I've got 2 coats of clear gloss enamel-based polyurethane on the surface. Each coat I let dry for 24 hours, and it came out pretty good. Now on the underside I cheated a little bit, so I'm only going to put a decal on one side here. So the rest of this I just left flat, and on the tail I went ahead and just glossed it. And when I'm done with the decals, and after I clean up around the edges to remove any of the residual clear adhesive, I will put a coat of Testor's dull coat on here to restore the flat finish, and then it'll be on to some weathering. So far so good.
Thanks for watching Part 9, and in Part 10 we'll apply the decals and we'll do surface weathering using pencil pastels. Part 10 is going to run a little bit longer than normal because I'm going to demonstrate to you how I use makeup sponges to apply those pencil pastels. With that, have a great evening and happy scale modeling. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And when you get the chance, visit our website at www.mikeashley.com, where you're going to find dozens of free PDF downloads, including tutorials, picture references, model galleries, projects, and my 5 original scale modeling books. Thanks to Ben Sound and Videvo for the royalty-free music, and happy scale modeling.